Commander Sarah watched the alien ships grow larger on her screens. The fleet had surrounded New Geneva Colony with 40 warships. Her small defense force had only 12 ships, and most of them were old mining vessels with basic weapons. "Commander, we're getting a transmission from their flagship," said Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. "Put it through," Sarah said. She knew what was coming. The main screen flickered to life. A tall alien with gray skin and 4 arms appeared. This was High Commander of the Empire. His black eyes stared at Sarah with cold hatred. Human Commander spoke in broken English. "You will surrender now. Your ships are weak. Your people are weak. Give up and some of you might live." Sarah looked around her bridge. Her crew of 43 men and women waited for her orders. Behind them on the planet below lived 8,000 human colonists. Farmers, miners, teachers, children, all depending on her to protect them. "We won't surrender," Sarah said. "This is human space. You have no right to be here." Made a sound that might have been laughter. "Right, we take what we want. That is our right. You have 1 hour to decide." The screen went black. Sarah's ships fought hard for 6 hours. They used every trick they knew. They hid behind asteroids and attacked from the shadows. They worked together like a pack of wolves. For a while, it looked like they might win. Then the reinforcements came. 20 more ships jumped into the system. Sarah's fleet was already damaged and low on ammunition. She had lost 4 ships and many good people. The math was simple now. They could not win. "Commander," said her second officer, Major Williams, "we have to think about the colony. If we keep fighting, they might destroy the planet." Sarah closed her eyes. She had read the Galactic Accords many times, the old treaties that all space-faring races had signed. Even they had agreed to follow the rules of war. Prisoners must be treated with dignity. No torture. No killing of surrendered enemies. "Open a channel to all ships," she said finally. When the channel was open, Sarah took a deep breath. These words would be the hardest she had ever spoken. "This is Commander to all Terran Defense Forces. We are outnumbered and, to protect the civilian population of New Geneva, I am ordering all ships to stand down. Power down weapons and prepare to surrender." The silence on the bridge was terrible. Then Lieutenant Torres spoke quietly. "Ma'am, if I may say so, it has been an honor to serve with you." "The honor has been mine," Sarah replied. The surrender took 2 hours. They boarded each human ship and took the crews prisoner. They were not gentle about it, but they followed the basic rules. No one was killed during the capture. Sarah found herself on the flagship with 847 of her people. Soldiers, pilots, engineers, medics, all now prisoners of war. The aliens put them in holding cells that were too small and too cold, but they were alive. High Commander came to see Sarah in her cell on the first day. "You fought better than expected," he said. "Most humans run like scared animals. You stayed and fought." "We protect our people," Sarah said. "That's what soldiers do." "Your people are nothing now," replied. "You belong to the Empire, but do not worry. The Galactic Accords protect you. We will follow the law." For 3 months they stayed in prison on the fortress world of Aura Prime. The conditions were hard. The food was bad and there was never enough water. Some of her people got sick, but they were alive and Sarah believed they would go home someday. The guards were cruel in small ways. They made the humans work long hours cleaning the prison. They played loud noises at night so no one could sleep. They gave the weakest people the hardest jobs, but they did not kill anyone. The law protected the prisoners. Sarah tried to keep her people strong. She organized exercise groups and classes. She made sure everyone had someone to talk to. She told them that Earth knew where they were and would find a way to get them home. "The war will end," she told them. "All wars end, and when it does, we'll go home." But on day 94, everything changed. Sarah was in her cell when the guards came for her. Not the usual guards who brought food or made them work. These were different. Elite soldiers with better armor and weapons. "You come," one of them said in broken English. "High Executor wants to see you." They took her to a large room with bright lights and many cameras. Other prisoners were there too. 50 of her people, including young Lieutenant Torres and old Sergeant Martinez. They all looked scared but tried to stay brave. High Executor walked into the room. He was bigger than the other, with scars on his gray skin and golden decorations on his uniform. He smiled when he saw the humans. "Today we make entertainment," he said in perfect English. "We show the galaxy what happens to those who fight the Empire." Sarah felt cold fear in her chest. "The Galactic Accords protect us. We are prisoners of war." "The Accords are words on paper," laughed. "Who will enforce them? Your weak Earth government, your pathetic colony ships." The cameras began recording. Sarah realized with horror that this was being broadcast. Somewhere in the galaxy, people were watching this like a show. "Please," Sarah said. "These are good people. They have families, children waiting for them to come home." "Then their children will learn an important lesson," replied. "Never fight the Empire." What happened next would haunt humanity forever. Sarah was forced to watch as her soldiers died one by one. The aliens made it last as long as possible. They cheered and placed bets on how long each human would survive. Lieutenant Torres was brave to the end. She looked at Sarah and whispered, "Tell them we fought well." Sergeant Martinez, who had 3 children back on Earth, died calling out their names. When it was Sarah's turn, she stood straight and proud. "You think you're showing strength," she told the cameras, "but you're showing the galaxy what you really are, cowards who murder helpless prisoners." Struck her down, but her words had been recorded. Her message would reach Earth. The last thing Sarah saw was the red light of the camera, still recording, still sending her final words across space to the people she had sworn to protect. On Earth, in the halls of government, military leaders watched the broadcast in stunned silence. President, a man who had always believed in peaceful solutions, sat in his office and watched good people die for alien entertainment. Something broke inside humanity that day. Something that had kept them civilized, restrained, hopeful that other species could be reasoned with. That something would never heal. The footage reached Earth at 14:32 Greenwich Standard Time on a Tuesday. By 1500, every human colony, space station, and ship in the galaxy had seen it. President sat in his office, staring at the black screen. He had watched the transmission 3 times. Each time hopping he had missed something. Each time hopping it was some kind of mistake or fake propaganda. But it was real. Commander and 847 good soldiers had been murdered for entertainment. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. President, the Parliament is calling for an emergency session. The Colonial Assembly wants to meet immediately. Admiral Santos is requesting urgent consultation." "Give me 10 minutes," said quietly. When the door closed, former Marine captain, veteran of the Titan Rebellion and advocate for peaceful solutions, put his head in his hands and cried. Then he wiped his eyes, stood up, and began preparing for war. The parliamentary building had never seen anything like it. Representatives from Earth, Mars, the Jupiter colonies, the Outer Rim settlements, and dozens of space stations filled every seat. The viewing galleries were packed with citizens who had demanded to witness this moment. Walked to the speaker's platform. The room fell silent. Every person there had seen the footage. Every person there knew why they were gathered. "My fellow humans," began. His voice was steady, but those who knew him could hear the rage beneath the calm words. 72 hours ago, we lost 847 brave men and women. They died not in battle, but as entertainment for an empire that sees us as animals." The room was so quiet that the ventilation system sounded loud. "The Empire has shown us their true nature. They do not see us as equals. They do not respect our right to exist. They have proven that no agreement, no treaty, no law will protect us from their cruelty. Paused and looked around the room. These people represented 6 billion humans scattered across 50 star systems. Farmers and miners, scientists and soldiers, children and grandparents, all of them now at war. I stand before you today to ask for something I never thought I would request. Not just a declaration of war, but a declaration of absolute war. This conflict will end only when the Empire no longer exists, when their government is gone, their military is destroyed, and their ability to harm innocent people is ended forever. The silence stretched for long seconds. Then Representative Sarah from the Mars colony stood up. "Mr. President, my son was serving on Commander's ship. He was 23 years old. He wanted to be a teacher after his military service." Her voice broke slightly. "I vote yes." One by one, every representative stood. Earth, Mars, Europa, Titan, New Tokyo, Station, the colonies, every human settlement in the galaxy. The final vote was 847 to 0, one vote for each murdered soldier. Admiral Santos was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years in the Navy, fighting pirates and protecting trade routes. She had never wanted to command a war of extermination. But as she sat in the Pentagon's war room, looking at intelligence reports about military strength, she knew that was exactly what this would become. "Ma'am," said General Torres, "our current fleet strength is about 60% of theirs. If we mobilize everything, including the reserve fleets and colonial defense forces, we might reach 70%. "What about industrial capacity?" Santos asked. "That's where it gets interesting," said Director from Military Intelligence. "They have superior technology, but their manufacturing is centralized on 12 major worlds. Ours is spread across 46 colonies and hundreds of space stations." Santos studied the star charts. They controlled a third of the galaxy's populated systems. They had been building their empire for 3,000 years. Humanity had been in space for barely 2 centuries. "What do we do when fighting an enemy that's stronger than us?" she asked the room. "Fight dirty," replied Colonel Park from Special Operations. "Hit them where they don't expect it, make them afraid to sleep at night." "Exactly," Santos said. "They think they know humans because they've fought our colonial defense forces. Small battles with limited objectives. They've never seen what humans can do when we stop holding back." She stood up and walked to the main display showing the galaxy. "The Empire follows traditional military doctrine. They fight for territory, resources, and political control. They expect us to do the same. They expect a civilized war with rules and limits." Santos turned to face the room full of officers and officials. "They're about to learn that humans don't fight civilized wars. We fight to win. And when someone murders our people for entertainment, we fight to make sure it never happens again." The transformation began immediately. On every human world, factories that made civilian goods began producing weapons and ships. Mining operations that extracted metals for buildings started making armor and ammunition. Even agricultural stations began growing food specifically for military rations. Dr. Elizabeth Harper had been working on experimental engine designs for civilian spacecraft. Now, she found herself leading a team to weaponize her research. The faster-than-light drives she had been perfecting could be modified to create devastating kinetic weapons. "We can accelerate a chunk of metal to 90% of light speed," she explained to the Weapons Development Committee. "When it hits something, the explosion will be visible from 3 star systems away." Similar conversations were happening across human space. Peaceful research projects became weapons programs. Trade ships were converted to carry Marines. Even passenger liners were fitted with guns and missile launchers. But the most important change was happening in the minds of humanity's military leaders. For 200 years, human doctrine had focused on defensive operations and limited conflicts. The goal had always been to achieve objectives while minimizing casualties on both sides. Admiral Santos threw those rules away. "We're not trying to capture territory," she told her staff. "We're not trying to force them to negotiate. We're going to destroy their ability to wage war, destroy their government, and make sure they never threaten anyone again." Lieutenant Commander Sarah, daughter of the Mars representative, volunteered for the first Special Operations mission. Her brother had died on Commander's ship, and she wanted revenge. "Ma'am," she said to Admiral Santos during her briefing, "what are our rules of engagement?" Santos looked at the young officer. 25 years old, top of her class at the academy, daughter of a woman who had voted for this war. "Lieutenant Commander, the Empire chose the rules when they murdered prisoners of war for entertainment. We're going to follow their example exactly." Sarah nodded. She understood. "No prisoners, ma'am. No prisoners." Within 6 months, the entire character of human civilization had changed. Colonies that had never seen a soldier now hosted military bases. Children who had played with toy spaceships now watched real warships launch from their home stations. The most chilling change was in humanity's attitude toward their enemies. Before the massacre, humans had viewed them as misguided opponents in a territorial dispute. People who could be reasoned with, negotiated with, eventually befriended. Now they saw them as something else entirely. A species that murdered helpless prisoners for fun was not human. They were predators that needed to be eliminated. President received regular reports about the military buildup. Ship construction was ahead of schedule. Recruitment was exceeding all expectations. Every human colony wanted to send soldiers and ships to the war. But the report that made him smile grimly came from Admiral Santos herself. "Mr. President," she wrote, "the Empire is about to discover something they clearly don't understand about humans. We're very good at being civilized, peaceful people, but we're even better at being the opposite when someone threatens our family." The war would begin in 3 months. Humanity was ready. The galaxy was not ready for what humanity had become. The fleet at Relay consisted of 38 warships. High Commander commanded from his flagship, a massive battle cruiser that had never been defeated. His orders were simple: destroy any human ships that approached the vital supply route. The humans had been quiet for 3 months since their dramatic declaration of war. Expected they were building up forces for a traditional assault. Perhaps they would bring 50 ships to match his fleet. Maybe they would try some clever flanking maneuver. He did not expect what actually came out of hyperspace. Admiral Santos had spent those 3 months studying every battle they had ever fought. They followed predictable patterns: large fleets in formation, direct assaults on enemy positions, honor duels between capital ships. "They fight like medieval knights," she told her staff. "Honor and glory and fair fights. They're about to meet 21st century pirates." The human attack began with objects that barely registered on sensors. Old mining ships, gutted and packed with nuclear explosives. No life support, no weapons, no shields. Just engines and the biggest bombs humans could build. Captain Maria Santos piloted the first kamikaze ship. She had volunteered the moment she heard about the mission. Her husband had been one of the soldiers executed on that horrible broadcast. "This is for you, David," she whispered as her ship accelerated toward the formation. Watched in confusion as the small human vessels approached his fleet. They were too small to be threats, too few to matter. His sensors showed no weapons, no shielding. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human ships appear to be cargo vessels, mining equipment." "Ignore them," ordered. "Focus on their real fleet when it arrives." That was his first mistake. Captain Santos's ship struck the battlecruiser at 17% of light speed. The nuclear explosion vaporized both ships and damaged 6 others nearby. Before the aliens could react, 23 more kamikaze vessels slammed into their formation. In 40 seconds, the organized fleet became scattered, damaged ships trying to understand what had happened. Then the real human fleet arrived. Admiral Santos had learned from studying Earth's ancient naval battles. When facing a stronger enemy, you didn't fight fair. You used every advantage you could find. Her ships came from 6 different directions, moving faster than vessels could match. They didn't try to engage in honorable combat. They swarmed like wolves attacking a wounded bear. All ships, Santos broadcast on the command frequency, remember what they did to our people. No mercy. The human attack was unlike anything in recorded galactic warfare. Instead of ship-to-ship duels, they coordinated attacks by dozens of small vessels against single targets. Instead of trying to disable enemy ships, they aimed for complete destruction. When a cruiser tried to surrender, transmitting the standard ceasefire codes, the human response was a torpedo barrage that split the ship in half. Found himself fighting for his life on a bridge filled with smoke and sparks. Half his fleet was gone. The humans fought with a savage efficiency that terrified him. "Sir," his communication officer shouted over the alarms, "the humans are not accepting surrender signals. They're destroying every ship they disable." "That's impossible," replied. "The Galactic Accords require." His words were cut off as human fighters strafed his bridge. Through the shattered windows, he could see his flagship's hull being torn apart by focused fire from 8 human destroyers. "Sir, we need to evacuate to the escape pods." Looked at his tactical display. 38 ships had become 12, then 6, then 3. His proud fleet was being slaughtered by humans who fought without honor, without mercy, without any regard for the ancient laws of war. As his flagship broke apart around him, realized something terrible. The humans weren't just winning this battle. They had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen. They had become monsters. While the space battle raged, human special forces were carrying out missions across territory. These were not traditional military operations. They were acts of sabotage designed to spread fear and confusion. Lieutenant Commander Sarah led a team of 12 specialists to the communications hub on or station. Their mission was not to capture the facility. It was to make the afraid to trust their own technology. "Remember," she told her team as they approached the station, "we're not trying to hold territory. We're showing them that nowhere is safe." The attack came at night during the station's sleep cycle. Human infiltrators had been studying daily routines for months. They knew exactly when security would be. His team moved through the station like ghosts. They didn't kill guards unless necessary. Instead, they planted devices that would turn the station's own systems into weapons. When they were done, the communications array that had coordinated military operations for 50 years began broadcasting human propaganda. Images of the murdered prisoners, messages telling citizens that their government had chosen war over peace. But the psychological impact went deeper than the messages. The fact that humans had penetrated the most secure facility in space and taken control of it without anyone noticing sent waves of terror through the empire. If they could do this here, they could do it anywhere. Similar operations were happening across territory. Power stations mysteriously failed, plunging entire cities into darkness. Supply convoys disappeared without a trace. Military bases found their own defense systems turned against them. High Executor read the reports in his fortress on Prime. Each one brought worse news. The humans weren't fighting like any enemy the Empire had faced. "They strike our supply lines, not our military bases," his intelligence chief reported. "They attack civilian infrastructure, not military targets. They seem to understand our logistics better than we do." "How is that possible?" demanded. "Sir, we believe they have been studying us for much longer than we realized. They know our weaknesses." What they didn't understand was that humans had spent their entire history fighting other humans. Every strategy, every dirty trick, every psychological weapon they were using had been tested in hundreds of wars on Earth and in the colonies. Humans knew how to destroy supply lines because they had defended against such attacks. They knew how to spread fear because they had lived with fear. They knew how to turn enemies against each other because they had survived civil wars and revolutions. They had conquered primitive species and fought other empires that followed the same rigid military traditions they did. They had never faced an enemy that studied their weaknesses and attacked them specifically. Captain Michael Torres led a squadron of fighters against the mining world of. The planet supplied rare metals essential for ship construction. A traditional attack would try to capture the mines and hold them. Torres had different orders. "We're not here to take the mines," he told his pilots. "We're here to make sure they never produce anything again." The attack lasted 6 hours. Human fighters didn't target the mining equipment directly. Instead, they destroyed the power stations that ran the machinery. They collapsed the tunnels that allowed access to the ore. They contaminated the water supplies that the workers needed. When they were finished, the planet could still be inhabited, but it would take years to rebuild the infrastructure necessary for mining operations. "Sir," Tor's tactical officer asked as they departed, "shouldn't we have captured some of the equipment? We could use those resources." "We're not trying to build an empire," Torres replied. "We're trying to destroy one." News of human victories spread across the galaxy faster than official reports. Independent traders brought stories of fleets destroyed without warning. Neutral planets heard about space stations that had been turned into weapons against their own people. The Confederacy, the galaxy's other major power, watched the conflict with growing alarm. Ambassador met with President on a supposedly neutral space station. "President," said in careful diplomatic language, "the Confederacy is concerned about the methods your forces are employing. The destruction of surrender vessels violates fundamental galactic law." His response was cold and final. "Ambassador, your people signed the same galactic accords that they violated when they murdered our prisoners. If you want to enforce those laws, you should have started with them. But surely you understand that this level of warfare threatens the stability of the entire galaxy." "The galaxy should have thought about stability before it allowed our people to be slaughtered for entertainment," replied. "This war ends when the Empire no longer exists, not before." As Ambassador left the meeting, she realized something that would keep her awake for months. The humans weren't just winning this war. They were changing the rules of how wars could be fought. And once those rules were changed, there would be no going back. Back on Prime, High Executor studied casualty reports and tried to understand how the situation had deteriorated so quickly. 6 months ago, humans had been a minor annoyance on the Empire's borders. Now they were systematically dismantling 3,000 years of civilization. "Sir," his military advisor said quietly, "perhaps it is time to consider negotiation." Turned to stare at the alien who had spoken such words. "Negotiate with the species I called vermin, the creatures we executed for sport. Sir, they have proven to be more dangerous than anticipated." Thought about the broadcasts that had started this war. How easily he had ordered the deaths of those humans. How much pleasure his people had taken in their suffering. Now those same humans were destroying his empire piece by piece. "No," he said finally. "We will fight until every human in the galaxy is dead. We will not be humiliated by inferior creatures." That decision would prove to be his final mistake. 18 months after the first human attack, the Empire was falling apart. It wasn't just the military defeats, though those were devastating enough. Half their fleet was gone, destroyed by human tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Their supply lines had been cut so thoroughly that some border worlds hadn't received supplies in 6 months. The real damage was psychological. The people were learning to fear the dark. Captain led the Psychological Warfare Division from a converted passenger liner that traveled constantly through human space. Her job was to make the enemy afraid to sleep, afraid to trust their own technology, afraid to believe their own government could protect them. "Fear is a weapon," she explained to her team of specialists. "They used it against our prisoners, broadcasting their executions to terrorize us. Now we're going to show them what human fear tactics can accomplish." Her first major operation targeted the industrial world of. The planet produced 60% of the Empire's military vehicles. Instead of bombing the factories, S team did something much more sophisticated. They hacked into the planet's communication networks and replaced all entertainment programming with a single broadcast. The execution footage of Commander and her soldiers played on an endless loop, 24 hours a day. But S team had edited the footage. They added subtitles in the language that translated Commander's final words. "You think you're showing strength, but you're showing the galaxy what you really are. Cowards who murder helpless prisoners." The broadcasts continued for 3 weeks. Every television, every communication device, every public screen on showed the same images. Civilians watched their own soldiers murdering helpless humans over and over again. Some citizens tried to destroy their communication equipment to stop seeing the images. Others demanded that their government explain why prisoners of war had been executed in violation of galactic law. Most disturbing for leadership was the message that appeared at the end of each broadcast cycle. "This is what your empire does. This is why they must die." The psychological operation worked better than it hoped. Protests erupted on demanding an end to the war. Production in the military factories dropped by 40% as workers refused to build weapons for a government they now saw as murderers. But the humans were just getting started. Dr. James Park had been a before the war, studying alien cultures and languages. Now he used that knowledge to design psychological weapons that cut to the core of society. They had a complex religious structure based on ancestor worship and the belief that honorable death in battle guaranteed spiritual advancement. Dr. Park's team exploited these beliefs with surgical precision. They began broadcasting funeral rites for soldiers killed in battle, but performed them incorrectly on purpose. Sacred words were mispronounced. Religious symbols were displayed upside down. The ceremonies were conducted in ways that theology said would damn the souls of the dead. "We're telling them that their own soldiers' souls are being destroyed," Park explained to Admiral Santos. "In their belief system, this is worse than physical death." The broadcasts were transmitted on military frequencies that soldiers monitored. Troops began deserting rather than risk having their souls destroyed by humans who understood their religion better than they did. But the most effective psychological weapon was the simplest one. Human forces began leaving survivors. When the cruiser was disabled near the system, human Marines boarded the ship and killed most of the crew. But they left 12 aliens alive in the escape pods, just enough to tell the story of what happened. The survivors reported that humans had moved through the ship like death itself. No emotion, no anger, no mercy. They killed efficiently and quietly, collecting equipment and technology as they went. "They took everything," one survivor reported. "Our weapons, our computers, our navigation charts. They studied our bodies to learn how to kill us more efficiently. They were not angry, they were just thorough." Similar stories spread throughout space. Humans who fought with the cold precision of machines. Enemies who showed no emotion as they destroyed fleets and captured technology. The stories grew in the telling. Some soldiers claimed that humans could not be killed, that they rose from the dead to continue fighting. Others said that human ships could appear and disappear at will, striking without warning and vanishing before retaliation was possible. None of these stories were true, but they didn't need to be. Fear was doing the humans' work for them. Admiral Santos read the intelligence reports with grim satisfaction. The military was beginning to break down. Desertion rates were climbing. Some border worlds were surrendering before human forces even arrived. But she also read reports that troubled her deeply. Human soldiers were changing too. Colonel Michael Torres submitted a routine after-action report following the capture of Station 47. His forces had taken the facility with minimal casualties and captured significant amounts of enemy equipment. They had also executed 200 prisoners after the station surrendered. "Colonel," Santos called him on a secure channel, "explain your decision regarding the prisoners." Torres appeared on the screen. He had been a gentle man before the war, known for his concern about civilian casualties. Now his eyes were cold and empty. "Ma'am, we followed standing orders. No prisoners." "Colonel, those orders apply to combat situations. These aliens had surrendered." "Admiral, with respect, the Empire chose the rules when they murdered Commander's people. We're playing by their rules now." Santos ended the call and stared at her screen for a long time. She had created an army that was winning the war, but she wasn't sure she recognized the people they were becoming. The same transformation was happening throughout human space. Soldiers who had once been careful to protect civilians now saw all as enemies. Engineers who had designed beautiful ships now created weapons of mass destruction. Diplomats who had spent their careers building bridges between species now worked to spread terror and despair. President received weekly reports about human military operations. The news was uniformly positive. Resistance was collapsing. Their industrial capacity was crippled. Several border worlds had declared independence from the Empire and were asking for human protection, but also received reports about what his own people were becoming. Stories about human soldiers who no longer showed mercy to anyone. Weapons that could destroy entire planets being developed in secret laboratories. Plans for the complete extermination of leadership. "Mr. President," his chief of staff said during one of their weekly meetings, "some of the military's requests are concerning." "What do you mean?" "They want authorization to begin biological warfare research, diseases that would target physiology specifically. The goal would be to make their worlds uninhabitable for their species while remaining safe for humans." Was quiet for a long moment. "What did Admiral Santos say when you asked her about this?" "She said that we're fighting for the survival of humanity, and that we should use every weapon available to ensure victory." "And what do you think?" "Sir, I think we're winning the war, but I'm not sure we're going to recognize ourselves when it's over." On the fortress world of Prime, High Executor received daily reports about the collapse of his empire. Each news briefing brought worse information. The human fleet had destroyed the shipyards at On, eliminating the Empire's ability to build new warships. The mining worlds that supplied raw materials were either captured or abandoned. 3 sector governors had surrendered their entire systems to approaching human forces rather than fight. "Sir," his intelligence chief reported during the morning briefing, "we're receiving communications from several neutral governments. The Confederacy, the Altair Republic, and the Independent Worlds Alliance are all requesting that we consider peace negotiations." "Peace?" laughed bitterly. "Have you seen what the humans demand for peace?" The intelligence officer consulted his notes. Complete surrender of all military forces, dissolution of the imperial government, war crimes trials for all military and political leadership, reconstruction of all destroyed human colonies at expense. In other words, the complete destruction of our civilization. "Yes, sir." Stood and walked to the large window that overlooked his capital city. Millions lived in the sprawling metropolis below. They depended on him to protect them from the human monsters that grew stronger every day. "Sir," his military advisor said quietly, perhaps it would be better to accept these terms than to see our people suffer further." Turned around slowly. The advisor was an old friend who had served with him for 20 years. "You think we should surrender to the creatures we executed for sport?" "Sir, they have proven to be far more dangerous than we anticipated. Our people are dying every day. Our worlds are being destroyed. Perhaps it is time to admit that we made a mistake." Studied his friend's face. He could see the fear there, the exhaustion, the growing realization that the empire they had served their entire lives was doomed. "No," said finally. "We will fight to the last ship, the last world, the last. We will not be humiliated by inferior creatures who should have been grateful for our mercy." His advisor nodded and left the room. That night, he sent a secret message to human intelligence, offering to provide information about defenses in exchange for protection for his family. He was not the only one. Across the empire, officials were beginning to make private deals with the humans they had once considered animals. The empire was eating itself from within, and everyone could see the end approaching. Everyone except High Executor, who sat in his fortress and planned for a final battle that would prove superiority once and for all. The Siege of Prime began on a Tuesday morning with the arrival of 200 human warships. Admiral Santos stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the fortress world that had been the center of power for 3,000 years. The planet was protected by energy shields that had never been penetrated, defended by orbital weapons platforms that could destroy fleets, and guarded by the last remnants of the Navy. "Ma'am," her tactical officer reported, "the enemy has 47 ships and 6 defense stations. The planetary shields are at full strength." Santos nodded. She had been planning this assault for 6 months, ever since the human advance had reached the home system. This would be the final battle of the war. "Begin the countdown," she ordered. Across the human fleet, ships began broadcasting the same message in the language. A simple countdown from 144 hours to 0, displayed in their numeric system and religious calendar. High Executor watched from his command center as the human fleet took position around his world. He had been expecting this moment for months, preparing for the glorious final battle that would show the galaxy that the Empire would never surrender. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "the humans are broadcasting some kind of countdown. We estimate 6 days until it reaches 0. "Are they trying to frighten us?" Laughed. "Let them count. Our shields have protected this world for 2, our defenses are impregnable." He was right about the shields. The energy barrier that surrounded Prime was a masterpiece of engineering, powered by the planet's core itself. No weapon in the galaxy could penetrate it. But Admiral Santos was not planning to penetrate the shields. She was planning to turn them into a weapon. Dr. Elizabeth Harper led the team of human scientists who had been studying captured technology for 2 years. They understood the shield system better than most engineers did. "The shields work by creating a harmonic frequency that deflects energy," she explained to Admiral Santos during the final planning session. "But if we can reverse that frequency, the shields become a crushing force instead of a protective barrier," Santos finished. "How long do you need?" 6 days to plant the devices and synchronize the frequency generators." "You have 6 days." While the countdown continued, human special forces were infiltrating Prime using stolen alien technology and 2 years of intelligence gathering. They moved through the planet's underground systems like ghosts, placing devices that would turn the Empire's greatest defense into its doom. Lieutenant Commander Sarah led one of the infiltration teams. She had volunteered for this mission specifically because it would end the war that had killed her brother. As her team planted the final frequency generator in the shield control center, She thought about what Commander had said in her final moments. You think you're showing strength, but you're showing the galaxy what you really are. Soon the Empire would learn what humans really were. On the fourth day of the countdown, received an unexpected visitor. His old friend and military advisor requested a private meeting in his personal chambers. The advisor said, using his personal name instead of his title, "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "I have been in contact with human intelligence. They have offered terms for surrender." Stared at his friend in shock. "You have been negotiating with the enemy." "I have been trying to save our people. We cannot win this war. The humans have destroyed everything we built. Our fleet is gone. Our worlds are captured or abandoned. This is the end." "Then we will die with honor." "No," his advisor said quietly. "We will die for your pride. Our people will suffer because you cannot admit that we made a terrible mistake." His hand moved to his weapon. "You speak of treason." "I speak of reality. The humans are offering to spare our people if you surrender. They want the war criminals who ordered the execution of prisoners, but they will allow our civilization to continue under their oversight." "Never." That night, his advisor was found dead in his chambers. The official report said he had committed suicide rather than live with the shame of defeat. The countdown reached 0 at exactly noon on the sixth day. Admiral Santos gave the order from her flagship, "Activate the frequency generators." The shield system that had protected Prime for 2,000 years suddenly reversed its polarity. Instead of deflecting energy away from the planet, it began focusing the planet's own gravitational field inward. The effect was immediately visible. The energy barrier that surrounded the world began to glow brighter and brighter as it compressed the atmosphere below. Cities that had stood for began to collapse under the increasing pressure. Watched in horror as his capital city crumbled around him. The humans had turned their own technology against them, using the Empire's greatest achievement as a weapon of mass destruction. "Sir," his communication officer shouted over the alarms, "the humans are transmitting surrender terms." Never screamed. But his staff was no longer listening to him. One by one, they began laying down their weapons and activating emergency beacons that signaled surrender to the human fleet. The compression field lasted exactly 1 hour. When it stopped, Prime was still habitable, but every military installation on the planet had been reduced to rubble. The capital city where had ruled his empire was a crater filled with twisted metal. Human marines landed on the planet within hours. They moved efficiently through the ruins, securing strategic points and gathering intelligence. Their orders were simple: capture the war criminals responsible for the execution of prisoners, secure any remaining weapons, and begin the process of transitional government. Was found in the ruins of his command bunker, trapped but alive. When the human soldiers pulled him from the wreckage, he expected to be executed immediately. Instead, they gave him medical treatment and transported him to a temporary detention facility. Admiral Santos arrived on Prime 3 days after the surrender. She walked through the ruins of the capital city, looking at the remains of an empire that had once controlled a third of the galaxy. President had given her specific instructions for this moment. "Admiral, when we win this war, the galaxy will be watching how we treat our defeated enemies. They will judge not just our military strength, but our character." Santos found in a holding cell that had been set up in the ruins of his own palace. The former high executor looked up when she entered, expecting to see gloating or anger in her face. Instead, he saw only exhaustion. "High Executor," she said formally, "you are under arrest for war crimes, specifically the murder of 847 prisoners of war in violation of the Galactic Accords." "I suppose you will execute me as I executed your soldiers," replied. Santos sat down across from him. "No, you will stand trial. You will have legal representation. You will be allowed to present evidence in your defense." "Why?" asked. "I showed no mercy to your people." "Because that's the difference between us," Santos replied. "We remember what we're fighting for." The trial lasted 6 months. It was held on New Geneva, in a courthouse built on the exact spot where Commander had surrendered to forces 3 years earlier. The evidence was overwhelming. Video recordings of the prisoner executions, orders signed by authorizing the murders, testimony from survivors. The prosecution presented a clear case that the former High Executor had deliberately violated galactic law. But the humans also allowed to present his defense. His lawyers argued that he had been following military tradition, that the humans were enemy combatants, that the stress of war had affected his judgment. The trial was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Every species watched as humans demonstrated that even their worst enemies would receive fair treatment under the law. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The sentence was life imprisonment, not death. Was confined to the same prison complex where human prisoners had been held before their execution. The cells were improved to meet galactic standards for humane treatment, but the symbolism was intentional. "You will spend the rest of your life in the place where you sent good people to die," Admiral Santos told him. "Every day you will remember what your choices cost." The Empire was officially dissolved. Their worlds were placed under temporary human administration while new governments were established. Former officials who had not participated in war crimes were allowed to participate in the rebuilding process. Most surprising to galactic observers was humanity's restraint in victory. They did not claim territory for themselves. They did not enslave the population or impose punitive reparations that would cripple their former enemies. Instead, they helped rebuild the infrastructure that had been destroyed during the war. They established schools and hospitals. They provided aid to refugees and displaced persons. President explained the policy in his final address about the war. "We did not fight this war to build an empire. We fought to ensure that no one would ever again murder prisoners for entertainment. The people are not our enemies. Their government was our enemy, and that government no longer exists." The war memorial on New Geneva was completed 5 years after the end of the conflict. It listed the names of all 847 prisoners who had been executed, along with the 12,000 human military personnel who had died in the subsequent war. At the bottom of the memorial was a simple inscription in both human and languages. "They taught us what mercy costs." Admiral Santos attended the dedication ceremony. She was retired now, living quietly on a small colony world, trying to forget the things she had ordered her people to do during the war. A young came up to her after the ceremony. He was a student at the human university that had been established on New Geneva. "Admiral Santos," he said in careful English, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For showing my people that there was another way. My father served in the imperial military. He told me that before the war, we thought strength only came from conquest and cruelty. You showed us that true strength comes from choosing mercy when you have the power to destroy." Santos looked at the memorial, at the names of the dead, at the young alien who had learned something about humanity that even humans sometimes forgot. "Your people aren't our enemies anymore," she said. "We're all just trying to figure out how to live together in this galaxy." As she walked away from the memorial, Santos thought about the choice humanity had made in their moment of greatest victory. They had proven they could be as ruthless as any species in the galaxy when their survival was threatened. But they had also proven something more important. They could choose to be better. The galaxy had learned what humans could do when they stopped holding back. But more importantly, it had learned that humans knew when to start holding back again. That knowledge would shape galactic civilization for generations to come.